another reason that you don't want too large, your recipient or their Exchange environment or wherever they run might reject your message because the message is too large. Too large. So even your environment allows you to send that email, whoever's getting it might reject it because of how large the attachment is.
Right. So, and that's another thing, because if I let them send out a 50 meg attachment and they send us 50 meg attachment to 100 people, how many are going to come back? So you're taking a hit on your network sending the message out, and then you're taking a hit when it comes back in undeliverable. So you're getting it both ways. So 10 megabytes is too small, but what should it be? Well, I usually don't go more than 25. 25 is the limit. But here's the thing. Let's say you go, and next week we'll talk about how to raise these limits in Exchange. We'll talk about Exchange 2010, how to raise these limits the correct way. But let's say you set the limit to 25 megabytes, and then you go to test it. So you send a 20 meg attachment, and it bounces. It says it's over limit. What happened?
So your limit's 25, your attachment is actually 20, and it gets rejected.
Right. And here's why.
Okay.
In the article, it'll tell you. But I've always wondered this. Until I found this article, I've always wondered. I knew that there's just like a print job. If you send a print job, you have a PDF that's 1 meg, you're sending more than 1 meg to the printer.
Right, because I assume because of it, like the header, or not the header, but there's more to it than just the 1.5 meg that print job, right?
Right, there is. And actually, it's not on this article. I'm thinking of a different article. But when you send a message, and I'm going to read it exactly as it says because I keep this in a folder and a specific bookmark to go back to it frequently. It says, you also need to remember and I'll put this will be the next week's show, but I'll read this one part because it's relevant here about sizes. When Exchange converts a message from MAPI/Exchange format to my message format and vice versa, this normally increases the message size by 30%.
30%.
Yep.
Now, why is it that it does the file conversion?
Well, I guess for Exchange to talk to the rest of the world, it sends it to, I guess, a standard format.
Got you.
So I raised the limit to 25 megs, and I sent the default was 10. So I had a 15 meg file, and I just sent that to test because, of course, remember, everything you do, test it.
Right.
You can't just set it and say, okay, it should work. Everything that I do, I try to test. So I sent a 15 meg file, and it bounces. Oh, no, that went through. So I thought, okay, great. It's great. It works. It's above the 10. I don't have a 25 megabyte file to test, so 15 went through, so I can tell it's not the default of 10 anymore. So I told him it should work. Well, he emails me back the next day saying somebody tried to send an 8 meg attachment and it bounced. I said, well, okay. Well, can we talk to him to verify that it's 8 megs? Well, he's a pretty smart computer guy. It's like, well, can we talk to him to verify? No, we can't. I'm not going to bug him.
All
so
right.
I sent him the same 15 meg file that I sent the test, and it went through.
How big?
15 meg. Okay. The one I tested the day before.
All right.
Now, he is saying 8, but I don't believe him. I don't believe it was 8 because the 15 went through. He said, oh, I got that. I said, well, then that's 15 meg. So obviously the 8 meg file he was sending you was not 8 megabytes. So I told him to get back with that guy. I said, or have him resend it, or have him send me the bounce back something. I said, because I can't troubleshoot it if I don't know the exact size. So he comes back to me and he says, okay, it was 23 megs. It wasn't 8. Okay, 23. That's fine. I said, it's still under the limit, so let me test. So I actually found a Word document that was 5 or 6 megs, and I just renamed it a few times and zipped them up until I got to 24 megabytes, which is pretty close. I sent that and it bounced. I said, okay, it bounced. So then I started doing research about this. And that's when I found this other article that says it can add 30%. So, of course, I take in my quick calculator, 25 times what, 1.3 gives you like what, 33 or something?
Why would
30,
you?
32 and a half.
Okay.
So I tested, I changed limit to 33 and it worked with a 24 meg file.
So you calculated to consider the 30% it adds to it.
Right. So, and I had a few other files. I had a 15 meg file that I sent that worked. I think I got up to a 17 or 18 meg file that went, but then I think 20 or 21 wouldn't go because it was, I guess, over the 25 after the overhead of the message conversion. Anyway, if you want to send a 25 megabyte attachment, the limit is going to be around 33, which is important because if you had the default at 10, it might.
At 10 megabytes, it might. Say it again, and because you're breaking up, I'm sorry.
Okay, so if the limit's at 10, you might have users complaining that a 7 or 8 megabyte attachment is bouncing.
Right. Okay.
Because you got to add the overhead, and then you're going to be wondering why. Well, they add 30%. Just add 30%. So you can tell them if the limit's at the 10, I would tell them the limit's at the 7. 7 megabyte attachment is a limit. Now, then of course you'll get into the discussion of can we raise it? I want no limit. Well, Exchange 03 had a checkbox, unlimited. You don't have that checkbox. There's no checkbox in that. You have to put a limit. So you can put some huge obscene limit, which is not going to do anybody any good. Or you can come up with a reasonable limit. But next week we're going to talk about how.
Well, not next week, right, Matt?
The next show. Correct.
Show. Gotcha.
The next show we'll talk about how to raise these limits and actually how to raise the limit for some, but not all, which can be a little tricky.
Right. And then, if you're in an environment where they're pushing you, and I say pushing you because I know you as a good network admin or whatever your title is, would never put a unlimited cap on there or unlimited or high file size for the attachment. But a lot of times due to politics, you get pushed toward that direction. I'm telling you, it can cause trouble because your mailbox store would increase dramatically. Like Matt's saying, 15 meg attachment times the 100 people he copied on the email. At some point, you'll be adding. You'll be adding hard drive storage. You're trying to compress the store. It's insane.
Now, of course, once you talk about the limits, they'll say, well, what do you suggest? So I have 2 suggestions. 1, don't try and email large files. 2, if you want to transfer large files, we need a file FTP server, which is intended for file transfer. Now, some people might say, well, what about Dropbox, that kind of thing? But that might work in small cases. But if you're emailing vendors, if a company always emails this certain vendors or 10 or 12 vendors, you don't really want to have to worry about setting up Dropbox with that vendor. You could install Dropbox, share a folder, email him, but then that's a hassle. And you really don't have much control over that either. This last company that had a problem doing this, we put an FTP server. So we can create a login for each vendor, a folder for each vendor, a login. So they can only have access to their folder. We can turn it off, we can turn it on, we can copy files into it. We have much more control over the FTP server than some other party like Dropbox or something. Plus security concerns. They don't necessarily want all these confidential documents on Dropbox. So, and the FTP server software is only a few $100s. You can use a free one. We use one from ServeU, FTP Voyager, Serveview, FTP ServeU.
Right,
it's
very
a couple
popular.
$100. Yeah, a couple $100.
Or there's one that's open source that also does secure FTP. Cannot think of the name of it right now, but
is it
yeah.
FileZilla?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the serve view is nice because it also comes with a web interface. You can just give them a web address.
It does.
So and if it's an add-on, but if you if you set it up correctly, give them the web address, it'll launch the FTP client in the web browser.
Oh, okay.
So the client doesn't need anything. They just need to go to the web address. So I found that works well for clients who consistently have to email large files. It's nicer. It's what it's intended for. But if I had a company with 2 users who wanted to email once in a while, I might suggest use Send It or one of those other services, or even just use Dropbox if they're exchanging files with somebody they trust and it's only once in a while. Yeah, but larger companies, I'd rather have more control. So we recommend an FTP server after if they've trying to send things that aren't meant for email.
Gotcha. Cool.
So
now we have a few emails that were sent in. The first one's from Dante. It says, I have a new client who has a small business server 2003 used as a file server and is changed for a 3-person office. This server has partition hard drive that is running out of space and I would like to upgrade the hard drive for more space. The server has a partition 80 gigabyte hard drive with a C logical drive that has a 16 gigabyte space and a 64 gig partition for data. So we have one drive, it sounds like 2 partitions, one being 16 and the other one being 74. It is also set up for RAID 1 configuration with another mirrored drive. What would be the best route to take to increase the size of the drive? What would it take to swap the drives out for larger ones? Dante.
So there's a couple of ways, and I think next time I do this, I'm gonna tell you the way I've done it before. The way I've done it before is use a Cronus, image the server, put the new disks in, create the array, put the image back.
Mm-hmm. And
that's the way I've done it before.
I will tell you what Matt is describing. I work in a very large environment with 300 plus the servers, and that's how they increase their volume. The step they use Ghost. They'll image the bots. They'll put the new, the new drives in, and blow the image back on. And when I talked to the person who actually is the equivalent to Matt Rainey over there, he says they have issues doing it, trying to expand the the storage. So it's easier just to ghost it, believe it or not.
Well, do you know what they were trying to use to extend the storage?
I don't know, but I will find out for you.
Because here's another way. The license for that, I'm thinking that is around, I think the Acronis Backup Recovery 11 Advanced Service, $500. I seem to remember it being more than that. So maybe they've went down on their pricing. But here's another option. Of course, that has downtime, right? Because you have to tell them get off, basically. Mm-hmm. Get off. Create the image, take out the drives, create the array, restore the image. And when I did it last time, creating the image was very fast. Restoring the image took like 8 hours.
Yeah, it is pretty time consuming.
Yep. And then when it came back up, Exchange was corrupted. So I had to run a repair on Exchange. And I called support and I asked them, why did it do this? They say, well, that's a common issue. And this is a couple years ago, so maybe the new versions worked this out. And this was SBS 03. So I can't say it's going to happen with later versions of Acronis or with later versions of Exchange server. But they said that's a common problem when you're moving the Exchange database. And he said, technically, we are moving it because we ghosted it, we imaged it and put it back. So technically, it was moved. So he said, all you can do is what you did, which is to run a repair in the database. Now, I can tell you what I'd probably do next time. And it would be no downtime. I would first, if there's 2 80 gig drives in there, I'd take out one, Let's say you want a 500 gig drive.